Hello, everyone, and again, welcome to the Overcoming 5 Critical Business Communication Challenges webinar brought to you by Rave Mobile Safety. Before we get started with the webinar today, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded, and the link to the recording will be emailed to everyone early next week. All lines will remain muted throughout the webinar, but if you would like to ask a question at any time or during the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, please use the GoToWebinar question tool at the top of your screen. Lastly, without further ado, I will now pass the floor over to today's speaker, Catherine Dahl.
Andrea, thank you so much. I'm really excited today to speak with everyone in the audience about overcoming 5 business communication challenges that they see in the workplace today. We have a great collection of businesses and organizations from across the country joining this webinar, and we look forward to speaking with you about the best practices available to you in your organization for critical communication. We have an interactive session today where we have a few poll questions so we can hear what's working for your organization and share the knowledge between the attendees and, of course, us here giving the presentation today. I see we still have some people diving in, setting up their phone lines. So as they do that, I want to just kick off here with our first slide, talking about time-sensitive business-critical scenarios. So here you'll see that there's a variety of situations where you need to send either routine, timely, or emergency communications. So whether that's something that affects the entire organization, like a weather event, an act of assailant, an act of terrorism, or workplace violence, or if it's something that's more on the department level, like something that affects facilities, operations, IT, the leadership team, or human resources. So if you look at this slide here today, there's probably a few things that jump out at you that if this occurred to you or to your organization, you would not be in a position to respond quickly or efficiently. So the goal of today's webinar is to really suss out these scenarios and really help you overcome the 5 critical business communication challenges, the things that prevent you from being able to respond to those scenarios. So today's webinar is broken up into 5 sections. First section we'll discuss today is rising above the everyday noise. So if there is an emergency that you need to notify everyone immediately, how do you get their attention and rise above the everyday noise of emails, meetings, messaging systems, so that message is delivered and received by the people who need to know it right away? In the next section, we'll talk about proactively communicating. So not just those reactive messages that you have to send out in an urgent situation, but also being proactive about the more routine and timely communications, how you can be sure to issue those communications and really work them into your organization, your roles and responsibilities, and your everyday practices. In our third section, connecting with traveling and lone workers, we'll talk about the rising population of employees that are mobile or lone workers or traveling internationally, and how even though they may not be in your office or in your building, it still have a duty as an organization to protect these employees. And we'll talk about how you can go about doing that and providing the same duty of care to all your employees wherever they may be. In our fourth section, receiving actionable feedback, we'll talk about how your employees are on the front lines of your organization and the steps you can take to empower them to provide information about certain scenarios, whether it's suspicious behavior, a violation, so you can really receive that feedback and act on it right away. And then our fifth and final section here about critical business communication challenges talks about delivering a faster resolution to business disruptions. So certainly if something does happen and it disrupts your business, we need to be able to leverage the communication tools, the best practices, the topics we talked about in the first 4 sections to get your business back and up and running again quickly. So you can't always prevent those things from happening, but when they do happen, you want to make sure that you have the policies and the procedures and the tools in place to respond efficiently and get your business up and running. So that's the agenda for today and the 5 topics that we will be discussing. Of course, we'll be leaving time at the end of the webinar for any remaining questions, but we do encourage you to submit any questions that come up through the right panel on the side of your screen there, as well as participate in the poll questions. Additionally, we do have a downloadable offer that we'll be sending to all of our attendees today, and this is our business communications checklist. So a great way to assess your current communications platform and your policies today, and how you can improve those. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and get started and moving into our first section here, rising above the noise of everyday communication. When you think about your organization, how do you reach all or specific employees wherever they are in the world? Your employees are inundated with email, IT ticketing systems, team collaboration software, messaging apps, social media, and other modes of communication. And the reality is that employees only have 3 minutes of consistent focus before an interruption. So if there is an emergency and you need to break through all that noise, how do you go about doing that? So we do have a poll question to kick it off today, asking, how do you notify employees today? So if you need to send out that urgent communication, how are you going about doing that? So please select all that applies, and here we have listed call tree, PA systems, email, instant messaging, or mobile app or mass notification. And great, it looks like the votes are coming in, so we'll give you a minute here to cast your vote on the right side of the screen. Okay, great. So just a few final seconds here to get your final vote in on how do you notify your employees today. And it looks like we have about 75% of you who cast your vote, so we'll go ahead and close this poll. Thank you, everyone, for your answers. Okay, great. So what we saw here is the most commonly used tool in our audience today is exactly what we would expect to see across the country, and that is email. It's extremely common to send communication through email. The next highest was mobile app or mass notification. And then the third was call tree, followed by instant messaging, and then finally a PA system. All right, so thank you everyone for providing those specifics. And as we go into our next slide here, you'll see how each of those communication tools we asked about help you break through the noise. So certainly email is a fantastic communication tool. I know I'm probably receiving hundreds of emails over the course of this webinar. However, an urgent or important email can get lost in the shuffle, does not get read right away, and it only works if email isn't down. Certainly if your email system or internet goes down, then you cannot rely on it as a communication method. So you'll see here in our chart, it has a great ability to reach people. However, them reading the messages and being able to act on it is not always reliable. Next, we had people say that they use mobile apps as well. So here, you'll see a mobile app is great at capturing attention and has a fast reach. Mobile apps especially are known to work well when there isn't Wi-Fi and people can still get through, or there isn't a signal and people can still get through via Wi-Fi, I should rather say. So that is certainly another option as well. However, it does require a bit more technology to implement, but it is certainly reliable. In the poll, we also had people say that they use a call tree, and this certainly is a reliable communication method. However, it can be very slow to deliver the messages. Unfortunately, only 10% of people are reached by a phone tree or call tree within 3 minutes. So if there's ever an urgent communication, it is not effective in getting the message out rapidly to everyone at once. Similarly, an instant message or social network collaboration tool does a good job of getting people's attention. People will check that, but it doesn't have that quick, fast reach. It's not seen as a priority, and it doesn't break through that noise to get to people's attention. Now, an in-person intercom system is not something that is used by a majority of you in the audience today. However, it is very good at capturing attention. However, it's only the case if you're within earshot. So certainly if somebody is off-site, or if they're not on your facility, they would not be exposed to that communication. So as we think about call trees, in-person intercom systems, email, apps, all of these tools have their benefits as far as capturing attention, but none of them are as reliable as a mass notification system. So when you think about a critical communications platform, something that can disseminate a message quickly to a wide audience and really rise above the noise for those urgent communications, a mass notification system is a great way to do that, and you'll see it has low technology required but high reliability. So when we think about one platform for critical communications, the real takeaway is that we don't want to rely on one channel. If there is an urgent communication, it's not just email, it's not just texting, it's not just a PA system. We really want it to be everything. So with one click, there's the unified platforms that allow you to rise above the noise by sending out a text messages, emails, voice calls, app notifications, social media updates, RSS feed updates to the websites, PA systems. All of those are done with a few click of a button in a communication system that's properly set up. And the real takeaway here is that you want redundancy across your communication channels. You can't rely just on email in case your internet or email server goes down. You can't rely just on a call tree because that doesn't take a long time. So really, we know it's a critical communication when we're getting a text, an email, and a voice call. That really is the signal that it's an urgent communication and it requires immediate attention. And a great example of that is an ISO New England, Massachusetts. They have terminated a disgruntled employee who had made threats against one of their locations. Unfortunately, at the time, there was no way for them to communicate to employees and to empower employees to report suspicious activity. So their problem was really twofold. They didn't know about this disgruntled employee's erratic behavior until it was too late, and then the situation escalated very quickly, and they wanted to warn their staff and their people on site that that person had been terminated and was not allowed back in the building, and they didn't have an efficient way to do that. So more often than not, we've seen with organizations is an incident happens and they realize they weren't properly equipped to handle it, and that's when they do an after-action report and realize they need to take the appropriate next steps. So now their employees do have peace of mind because they use Rave to immediately notify employees of critical information, those employees notifications that need to break through the noise, as well as have a two-way communication so staff is also able to send that information back to them as well. All right, so as we move to the next section here, section 2, proactively communicating with employees. So due to federal regulations, all employees that have graduated from college over the past 10 years are accustomed to receiving text messages, updates from their higher education institution. Certainly when I was in school, if we had a campus closure or weather, we would look to those notifications to know immediately if we needed to start studying or if we could put it off a day. So now those of us who were recently in school those past 10 years carry those same expectations into our institutions and our places of work. And add on to that the layer of social media. We, as a population, are now conditioned to instantly receive information. We want that information right away, and we expect to receive it from where we're working. So when we think about the type of communications that your employees or your staff are looking to receive, we just spoke about urgent communications. Those communications where you send the email, the text, the voice, the PA system, the mobile alert, all of that, you want that to go out to everyone who needs to know, and you want that to really rise above the noise. But hopefully, for the majority of your workplaces, those highly urgent communications are not the majority. And more often than not, you're sending timely communications. So whether it's about weather closures, for the office closures, a system outage, you're able to send more targeted and timely notifications to offices. You may not need to notify everyone, but certain departments or locations of key timely communications. And then even more often than that are the routine, regular communications. So say, for example, we have healthcare enrollment or a holiday reminder, and these can be sent out company-wide or at the department or team level, and they're more routine communications that you're able to distribute to your staff. So as we think about these communication best practices, this is where we want to make sure that you have the information to properly notify your staff when you're establishing these critical communications. And step one for that is to have up-to-date contact information. So certainly this can be a bit of a hard conversation to have internally, but you really want to make it easy to add or update employees, contract and visitors so you have the most up-to-date information, and you have all the ways to communicate with them. So certainly you'll need to work with your HR department on a BYOD policy. So if they bring their own devices, what is your company's policy to work towards that if they can receive that information on their device? And as we think about leveraging and utilizing that contact information, we have another poll question for you here. So the next poll question we have is, how do you collect your employees' mobile phone numbers today? So we'll open up the poll here for another minute as we wait for your responses. And the question again is, how do you collect your employees' mobile phone numbers today? Options being we don't, they're stored in the HR database during onboarding, we have an online opt-in, or we have a paper form opt-in. And certainly if you don't feel like any of these answers are appropriate for your organization, feel free to type in the chat box if you have an additional answer, you have additional insights into how you're collecting employees' mobile phone numbers today. All right, just wrapping up the final 10 seconds here for you to make or cast your poll on the right side of the screen. All right, great. So we'll go ahead and close out that poll here. All right. So as we look at the results, thank you everyone for participating in our poll. The most common answer is stored in the HR database during onboarding. Second, online opt-in. Third, paper form opt-in. And then fourth, we don't. So it's great to see that everyone has access to the mobile phone numbers. The majority of you do. Okay, great. Certainly, it could also be that we do also see from time to time a hybrid where your database of record is your HR system, but you still may have employees supplement that with an online poll or paper form as well. What we've heard from organizations is they really like to put the ownership of the contact information onto the employees. So they are responsible for keeping it up to date. They can enter it into the system. And that way, it's one less thing for the employer to do. Another best practice to think about as you establish your critical communications is to define what constitutes a routine, timely, or urgent communication. So as we talked about those different levels, you want to understand who you'll be sending the message to, who has the rights to send it, what occasion warrants certain type of communication mode. So perhaps routine communications are only done via email, but timely is a combination of email and phone, and then an urgent is email, phone, and text. So it really can vary depending on what's best for your organization, but you do want to have buy-in from your key stakeholders on what each of those definitions are and who is doing what. Similarly, as you build out those policy and plans, establishing the frequency and the level of communication. So what do we use this for and who's getting the messages? Will you update every 30 minutes, even if there's no new information, or will you update only when new information is available? And as I said, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's more about figuring out what's right for your organization and making sure everyone understands. So the people administering the messages understand, as well as the recipients understand when they can expect to receive communication. Issues arise when people are not on the same page and they don't have a clear understanding. And finally, as you think about the types of communications you'll be sending, we really want to be very clear. So think about what are the right terms that will be unambiguous and not cause confusion. For example, is there more than one parking lot? If you just say the parking lot, is that clear to people? Is the word gunman appropriate for female assailants? To think about people receiving this information on the other side, it very well may be an instance of panic, and you need to be as clear and as actionable as possible. And the one way to do that is to leverage pre-created messaging templates. You don't want to be in the moment writing about a gunman or an active assailant. Ideally, you understand what those threats are to your workplace, what scenarios you expect to see, and you can pre-create those messaging templates. It's not just the language of the alert itself, but also the audiences, the channels, on who is sending. That can all be decided ahead of time. 75 to about 80% of organizations surveyed encountered situations that they foresaw as possible threats. So for example, our office is located in Massachusetts. So the first template we would make would be for severe winter weather. We know it's coming, we know it affects the entire office, and we would want to have that prepared, and then really build out from there. Additionally, as part of your planning, you want to identify alternates and backup plans. Certainly, this is something I've carved out a lot in this webinar. Redundancy is key. You want to be able to rely on multiple modes of communication. So if your email goes down, you can still send a text or a voice call. If your entire system goes down, you can have a backup redundancy on another site. A lot of the times you can partner with your provider to build out that redundancy, but ultimately you want to make sure you're avoiding sole reliance on, say, a Wi-Fi or an internal server. You don't want any single points of failure for your internal communication. Additionally, practice. A plan is only as good as its execution. So certainly, it's one thing to know you're going to send an alert, but to be ready, to have the muscle memory, and to be able to send an alert and execute on that is very different. So to make sure you are prepared, you want to be able to utilize training, drills, tabletop exercises, so your organization is ready should these situations arise. And I think a great example of the importance of the practicing is one of our customers out of Texas. In Florida, they're an operations and maintenance contractor, so they provide services to the U.S. Department of Energy, and they wanted to streamline their processes. So because they sent out a lot of alerts and internal and external notifications, they saw that it was a very manual and time-consuming process for them. And through those testings and their use, they realized they needed to make a change. So as a result, Gary Simon, their senior emergency response team specialist, led the effort to upgrade their communication system. And they noticed that just simple things like reducing the number of steps it took to send out an alert saved 67% of their time. So it's those small things that you realize in the day-to-day operations that really start to add up. So by making a switch and doing those tests, they realized what their need was, and they were able to find a better solution for that. All right. So as we move here into our next section on connecting with traveling employees during critical events, 74% of companies feel it is more dangerous for employees to travel domestically and internationally than 2 years ago. And I think if any of us watch the news, this certainly isn't a surprise. Events such as major floods, terrorist attacks, transportation disasters, all of these events immediately lead to questions about what employees are at risk and where are they located. So with the more danger is more expectations. And in a recent survey, 78% of organizations stated that their leadership team wanted them to confirm that their people are safe and accounted for, which can be difficult when you have employees spread across the globe. And not only did they want them to be accounted for, they wanted them to be accounted for within an hour of a terrorist attack or a critical event. And when surveyed, only 36% said that they could do this today. And this is difficult to maintain an accurate record of where employees are expected to be during working hours, nevertheless, ones that are traveling throughout the globe. So when we think about if there is an event and you need to be able to report that you have staff on the ground, that you're getting out, or there is nobody in the area, what is the best and most efficient way to do that? Certainly, they don't expect you to be able to track employees and their locations at all times. That's just not feasible and not really efficient. But if you need to search a certain area to see if there's employees in that area, and then send an alert to anyone in that area, you can certainly do that today. So you can send alerts to people at those locations, to employees, to make sure that they're okay. And the key here is not only just understanding the employee's location and sending them an alert based on their location, but it's also about sending specific and actionable alerts. So really helping them to explain if they need help or tell them what to do. So really providing those next steps with clear instructions. And sometimes we do hear pushback that maybe our employees don't want to provide their location, they don't want to be tracked. But when push comes to shove, 77% of employers said that their employees would prioritize safety over privacy concerns when it comes to identifying their location during a critical event. So this is really the difference between tracking and knowing their every whereabout versus being able to determine if they're in an area of threat and being able to send help, and that's a clear difference here. So once you establish that they are in an area, this is where it comes back to clear and actionable data. So you don't want to just ask, are you okay? Because free-form responses won't cut it. If they respond, yes, thank you, yes, yeah, that soon becomes too many responses that are very difficult to aggregate and track. Instead, we encourage sending out a poll that has responses that can be categorized into responses. So it's not an open-ended question, but they can respond yes, no to a poll. That way, the messages can be tracked, the responses can be aggregated, and action items and commands can be included. So those who aren't okay, you know to send a follow-up alert to those people with even more specific instructions. And a great example of that is one of our customers, GE. So when Hurricanes Harvey and Irma struck Texas and Florida, the security team at GE Appliances quickly accounted for all employees in the impacted area. So they were able to determine who was in the area, send an alert, determine if they were in danger, and help those employees evacuate. And a few weeks later, certainly we remember this was a very difficult hurricane season here. So a few weeks later, Hurricane Maria approached South Carolina, and because of their response to Harvey and Irma, GE was able to communicate and assist employees before, during, and after the storm. And that really is the goal for organizations, to move from reactive to proactive, and that is a great example here. In our fourth section, receiving actionable feedback from employees, we talk about confidential and discreet tips. So employees are on the front line and they observe safety, security, and facility red flags. And they are in and out of all your organizations, interacting with your people, and as a whole, they have much more information about your organization than a few members of your team do. So if they encounter suspicious people or vehicles, if there's a maintenance issue, signs of substance abuse or behavioral issues, we really want to empower them to identify those risks and share it. Unfortunately, today employees often do not report these observations. So it's up to us as organizations to provide a vehicle for employees to feel comfortable reporting information, especially because 70% of respondents feel that risks in the workplace increased in this past year. And workplace violence is certainly on top of mind. Once again, the news coverage of threats to employees in the workplace, especially women, are top of mind, and 1 out of every employee will be victimized. 18,000 workplace assaults are logged weekly, resulting in $121 billion annually lost due to workplace assaults. So not only do we want to protect our employees and keep them safe, but there is a cost associated to our businesses from these workplace violence threats. And that's why we encourage a proactive response. A recent study showed that $3 or more is saved for every dollar invested in workplace safety. So as we think about workplace threats, active shooters is one that absolutely comes to mind. But we do have a poll here to ask you and our audience, what do you think the biggest workplace threat is? So in the poll on your screen, you'll see we asked if you think it's a medical emergency, a severe weather event, a technological emergency, a fire, or workplace violence or active shooter. And this is specific to your organization and what you foresee or concerned about for this upcoming year. So we'll give you about 30 more seconds to answer this poll question. Okay, great. Looks like we have all our answers in, so we'll go ahead and close the poll, which always seems to lock me out of presentation mode. All right, so in the audience, the #1 response was severe weather events. So my guess is a fair amount of you are here in New England. Certainly the winter weather is always top of mind. And then the second is the medical emergency. Third, technological emergency. And then fourth, workplace violence, active shooter. And the results to the poll are similar to what we had when we did a nationwide survey. Nationwide medical emergencies were a higher threat, but then followed shortly by weather events, which is what we had in the audience here. And then technological emergencies was third. So a lot of times when you think about the threats to your workplace, medical emergency, weather events, we don't have as much prepared for those situations, yet the ones like a fire, I feel like I've personally done a fair amount of fire drills over the course of my career, but we've never had a drill to discuss medical emergencies or what would happen in the event of a weather event. So it's really about understanding the threats to your workplace and making sure that your emergency plans and preparations map to what you think will actually occur in the upcoming year. So as we think about those threats to your workplace, it really is important and imperative that you encourage your employees to solicit feedback. So our recent survey we conducted showed that people are more likely to submit feedback if it's done via text message and it's done anonymously. So you can't rely on a 1-800 number. One, it's just a little bit more of an ask for somebody to call in to speak versus anonymously typing a text. Text allows for continued back and forth as well as the ability to submit photos. That way you have a two-way response to gather information. And this isn't something that has to be monitored 24/7, but you can open it up to those times where you want people to share that feedback. And we've heard these situations where somebody is on the premises that doesn't look familiar, somebody is being very suspicious, somebody has a gambling problem. Whatever it may be, it's rather important that you have these issues submitted to you so you can leverage that information and you empower your employees to do that. Certainly, if a light goes out in the parking lot and they feel that's a threat to their danger, that's an easy thing to fix, and you might not realize that unless they submit it. All right, so as we wrap up here, we're on to our final section, delivering faster resolution to business disruption. So in the first 4 sections today, we talked about emergency notifications, the type of urgent communication you want to rise above the noise, proactive communications, where messages where they're not only urgent but also timely and routine, planned, thought out responses. Additionally, we talked about protecting and connecting with traveling employees. And then finally, the two-way communication to solicit that anonymous feedback for actionable response. And each of those best practices ultimately culminate in a faster resolution to a business disruption. So by having those best practices in place, you are in a better position for your organizations to get back online and up and running sooner after any type of event. And some key things that really assist with a faster resolution is role-based access controls for department-level access. If you only have one person in your organization who can send out a critical communication, that's very limiting. However, you can train people across your organizations and give them various levels of access, and it's all in that planning and communication where they understand the type of messages they can send, and they're limited to who they can send to. But really having that role-based access control to scale the communication company and department-wide. Additionally, you want to be able to quickly assemble decision makers to help execute on your plan. There's nothing worse than during a crisis spending more time figuring out how to communicate the crisis than actually solving the problem. So things like a one-click conference bridge that gets all your decision makers on a phone call all at once, that's the type of easy technology you can leverage to save time and help people execute right away. Additionally, the real-time reporting and communication. So as an incident's unfolding, letting people know what's going on, soliciting their feedback, and having those real-time communication and reports, not only for your decision-making during the event, but also for your after-action after the event to kind of understand what could be done in the future and what could be done better. And a great example of having a faster resolution to a business disruption is a local bank out of Washington State. So their internet went down and they were offline from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., which is almost the entire course of a full day. And that affected their 29 bank locations that had no access to their systems. So they had to quickly disseminate to their team instructions that A, their system went down, and then B, that they could work offline to serve their customers and they could keep their branches open. So they were able to pull up their cell phone and send that notification out right away. And then they were able to continually provide instruction and feedback. A lot of the branches didn't even know how to go offline, so they had to share those instructions. And previously, they had been using phone trees, and they shared that if they had used a phone tree in this event, probably half of their branches would have remained closed all day. So as a result, all 29 branches were able to remain open because they could quickly provide instructions to set up their systems offline. And when I spoke with this business continuity manager, she shared with me for her, it was almost a good thing that it had happened because it really showed the value of having them put these procedures and policies in place, and no one would really ever again question having this type of communication system. So as we think about Rave and what our organization offers, we partner with businesses and organizations to help them communicate, collaborate, and respond. And depending on your organization and the type of critical communications you want to send out, it may be something you're looking for mass notifications, two-way critical communications with unlimited voice and text, or you may be looking for something more collaborative where you have polling and response, anonymous tip submissions, visitor opt-ins, weather notifications. Or we have a respond where in addition to those two solution sets, we customize employee check-ins, geo-targeted alerts, a personal safety app, incident management and response dashboard. So we really have these solutions customized to your organization and to fit your needs on how you want to scale your critical communication, so you can help your employees and really communicate, collaborate, and respond more efficiently. So as we open up the floor to questions, please make sure to either raise your hand or submit them in the question field on the right side of the screen. And just as a reminder, as we wait for those questions to come in, we are offering a business critical communications checklist download. So this will be sent as a follow-up today to any email, to you via email, so you can help measure your communications in your organization today and identify your gaps and what you need to do to improve communication. So just thank you for everyone attending today, and we'll be making sure to, in addition to sending the slides, the recording, we'll also be sending a link to this checklist. All right, so Andrea, I'll pass it over to you, and then you can start sharing the questions as they come in.
Okay, so I have the first question here. So the question is, what do you do if employees don't opt in?
Great, so that's a great question. I think when we did the poll, we saw that a lot of employers are including the opt-in process during the HR onboarding, and that is a great option because it's a great way to sit down, explain the benefits of opting in, and specifically why they would benefit. So I think a lot of times the key to getting employees to opt in is to understanding the benefits to them and making it easy for them to do so. So whether it's during the onboarding, providing a link, those are the ways that you can really establish the benefits of opting in and making it easy for them to do so. We haven't seen that we've received a lot of pushback from employees, since ultimately it's a service for them to keep them up to date.
Okay. Our next question is, we don't have a security team. Who should send alerts?
This is a great question, because certainly we see organizations of every size leveraging critical communications to send out alerts, notifications. So it doesn't require it to be a security team. If we go back to that first slide in the deck, we'll recall that oftentimes the communications could be sent by the facilities, operations, executive leadership, HR, business continuity. And I would encourage it one person should be the owner of the system, but really the ability to send alerts should be scalable throughout the organization. And that's where something like role-based access control comes in, where varying levels of people can send alerts depending on their need.
Okay. The next question is, where do the tips go?
So with a system, if you want to have the tips, that is sent to a dashboard where somebody can monitor that. It certainly doesn't require 24/7 monitoring, and they can pull that up in a web-based browser to view those tips and then respond when they're ready. So that is something that you can choose who you want to receive based on your organization. Often we see it go to facilities, security, safety, or human resources, depending on how the organization is structured.
Okay, I think that was our last question, unless anybody else has another question to ask. All right, we're going to wrap up the Q&A session. Again, thank you everybody for attending. As a reminder, just as Catherine mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be sent out to you early next week via email, as well as this downloadable offer that you see on the slide here. Thank you again for attending our webinar, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.